Hello, we're at the International Security Forum at the Center for International Security and Governance in Bonn, and we've got Jeffrey Rathke with us, the Center for Security and International Studies. Jeffrey, thank you very much for joining us.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks so much, Zulfikar.
Excellent stuff. Perhaps we could start this way. How has the election of President Trump changed transatlantic relations?
Well, I think it's changed it in a couple of ways. On the one hand, you've seen changes in policy, or at least changes in inclination from the Trump administration. They are critical of, skeptical about the U.S. international leadership role. Clearly the president feels that the U.S. has to do too much for the benefit of others without getting benefits in return. So that on the one hand, you have a new skepticism about all relationships, not just the transatlantic relationship. And then at the same time, there's a reaction against that in the United States. You see this very strongly in Congress, where members from the Republican and Democratic parties have voted against the administration on important things like Russia sanctions, for example, trying to create boundaries and to constrain the administration's ability to radically alter U.S. foreign policy.
And so, from your perspective, are we seeing an impact already on international order because of that?
Well, I think we're seeing the beginnings of it. I think if you want to look, the U.S. withdrawal from the Trans-Pacific Partnership trade deal, for example, which hadn't been ratified yet, so you could say that it was not a done deal, although it had been negotiated by the Obama administration. You see it in the renegotiation of the NAFTA agreement, and also the noises made by the administration about wanting to renegotiate the Korea-U.S. free trade agreement. So you see it already in those areas. You see it as well in the U.S. emphasis on burden sharing within NATO, which is something we've been talking about here a lot over the past day.
I mean, in terms of order, when the U.S. makes statements about deals with South Korea, for instance, during a very tense time with North Korea, what does that do? I mean, what sort of an immediate impact has that? And why would you do that?
I don't know exactly why you do it. I can say that certainly the impact that it has is to weaken our allies or raise concerns among our allies and their populations about the durability and the credibility of U.S. security commitments. So it is, it's not clear what the intent is, but it certainly has the effect of making the U.S. look like a less reliable guarantor of the international system that it built after World War II. So, in my view, it's counterproductive. Why the president responds that way is a little harder for me to figure out.
Okay, so given that, should Germany and Europe take more or shoulder more responsibility internationally?
Well, I think Europe is already planning to do that, and so I think an important element of any response is to be calm and self-assured, because since 2014, since the Russian invasion of Ukraine, for example, all NATO allies have committed to increasing their defense resources. Germany has been doing that. It continues to do that. And so in that sense, President Trump is calling on Germany to do what it was already doing, maybe to do it a little faster, I guess. But that remains within the framework of what Germany already was doing. And Europe and Germany in particular are very important to the United States, and vice versa. So I think focusing on those areas of common policy interest is important to create and emphasize those shared interests to ride out what are sometimes times of friction.
Mm-hmm. But is that enough for Germany and Europe to pick up the slack or to do more in the face of a reduced engagement from the United States? Can it compensate for that reduced engagement?
Well, I don't think there's any question that Europe alone is not in a position to defend itself. Europe relies on the United States for its defense in a military sense, and so in that regard, it would be reckless for Europe to try to decouple itself from the United States. Europe needs the United States. And so I think what is important now is to focus on the particular policy areas where we can do things together, and to we've had administrations before that were critical or skeptical of Europe. The George W. Bush administration, for the entire first term, tried to categorize Europe into old Europe and new Europe, and to work with one and ignore the other. And they eventually came around to realize, that is the Bush administration, that they needed to work with the European Union. They needed to work with all of its traditional allies in Europe. And so I think, being able to, have patience and remain committed to the values and goals that we share is the best approach.
Jeffrey Rathke, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.